All right. Welcome to Lookout. All right, there we go. Hey everyone, welcome to Lookout, our second live stream. Starting to figure it out a little bit, I hope. Today's August 2nd. It's midday, it's 2:15. And going to give a quick update on the McKinney Fire. Going to look at the China 2 fire over by Syad Valley. The Kelsey Fire, which is burning on the west side of Scott Valley. And also Shackleford Fire. And then there's another fire to the north that I forgot the name. So we're just going to look at the intel that's come in this morning from FIRIS, which is publicly funded infrared mapping that's now being run by the OES, California State OES, but it was kind of pioneered by Orange County, and it's pretty great. The idea with it is that there's a lot of kind of military technology over the years that hasn't made its way into wildfire, and now that there's a lot of funding for wildfire, the military contractors are getting this stuff out here, and there's also some cool open source stuff that people are using to deliver this mapping information to people on the ground via their phones. And the nice thing about it being public access is that you don't need a password, you don't need government email. I found in doing technology on fires, I'll be working with an operations section chief who's, way up in his agency, and I'll want to install an app on their iPad so I can give them a map, and they won't have the password because it's just like anyone else. Simple things like that, not having the password, not having, your Apple ID or something. The same stuff that frustrates you putting an app on your phone really can be a barrier to a firefighter installing an app that's going to give them critical intel that helps them not get burned up. So nice thing about FIRIS being open, it removes some of those barriers. It allows people like me to get this information and put it in a package that is accessible. So appreciate all the people that have been working on that. Want to give a shout out to a guy named Andreas Johansson in Southern California, who's really been a pioneer of helping us transition this stuff. He's a former hotshot, now city firefighter, who's just really helped on his own initiative pioneer making this stuff happen. So shout out to AJ, shout out to FIRIS and everyone who's putting all this stuff together that allows us to better understand how things are working on the ground. So to jump into the fire, not a lot has happened in the movement of the fire. A lot has happened in the fighting of the fire over the past 36 hours. So last night we didn't get our normal kind of infrared flight just because it's cloudy and those things can't see through water vapor really well. So what we've got is we've got the perimeter from night before last in yellow and hot spots in red, and then we've got the pink stuff, which is what FIRIS flew this morning. And so places where you see the pink line not touching the yellow or red, that's places that the fire spread in the last 36 hours. Just want to kind of start out the big picture. Wairika on the right, Fort Jones on the bottom, Scott Bar on the left. These blue areas are areas that burned in 2014, 2016, and 2014. So we're going to come in here on the south end of the fire, kind of on the Fort Jones side of the divide here. There's kind of a divide through here where water that flows this way flows into the Scott River, water that flows this way flows into the Klamath River. And the fire is kind of burned up to that divide. So we're just going to come in here, and we'll go up Indian Creek here. This is some of the steeper ground, more rugged ground on the fire. And it's a place that we're kind of lucky that the fire didn't push harder over the hill here on its initial run. In just that it may still be containable along this edge at the top. Once it is down in deeper into the canyon, it's harder to deal with, obviously. So what we see here is that in the past 36 hours, these red spots here have spread a bit down, become more established. There are old logging roads in here, and you can see here that the fire is kind of down to the road. And so, there's potential that these will get picked up just because we do have road access. As we've talked about before, we have problems on the steep ground with what we call rollout, burning material rolling downhill, snags falling across the line. So, when we talk about a fire having, this fire right now has about 90 miles of perimeter. You have to account that we have to go and basically dig a ditch around the entire edge of this thing for it to be what we'd call contained. So people are asking, hey, we've got all this fire line in, how come the fire's not contained? Until people can come in here and snag all along here, cut down trees, dead trees that could catch on fire and fall in the compromised line, we can't call it contained. So just when you think about 92 miles of ditch digging on steep ground, even with 1,000 firefighters, that's only, do the math, 10 firefighters per mile. And a lot of the firefighters, when you hear there's 1,000 firefighters on a fire, if they're working 24-hour shifts, that means you only have 500 per day. So, a little trivia. Anyway, the fire's back down there a little bit. Fire's back into the canyon a little bit here. All in all, pretty minor for 36 hours of spread. We're going to come around here into, this is Mill Creek. So we're above Scott Bar here, so I'll just zoom out a little bit. We're looking west. Scott River Road's going to be at the bottom here. Coming up from Highway 96 toward Fort Jones and Scott Valley, which would be off to the right. So Mill Creek, also one of the steepest, nastiest parts of the fire. These black lines are shown on the operations map as proposed dozer lines, planned dozer lines. I don't know if they've been done yet. One thing I do know from working on a lot of fires is that the dozer operators are a lot more interested in pushing dirt than they are in pushing a pencil. And so they do a lot of work that the map people never hear about. We're lucky if we get good intel on what dozer lines are. Oftentimes we get the best intel on dozer lines after the fire's out, and field observers are scouting out there to look at all the work we need to do to repair the dozer lines. So I don't really know what's the status of any of the dozer line, except what's showing on the ops map. And for now, the dozer line on the ops map is mainly on the east side of the fire by Wairika. So similarly here to Indian Creek and Mill Creek, we've got fires slowly been chunking its way downhill in these areas where we're probably not going to have people doing a direct attack just because of the access, the fuels, and the rollout and other issues. It's likely, where we do have roads and access in here, those are places where either there's probably already a dozer out there pushing to improve roads. If it's too steep, that doesn't work. But generally, the roads are giving us access, and you'll see things like tying a road into a hand line, into a dozer line. So where you do see roads on here, just that is a bonus for the firefighters. All right, so we're coming around here down towards the Klamath River above Horse Creek. More planned dozer line, status unknown to me. And looking at the pink line here, looking up Horse Creek, or over Horse Creek, up the Klamath River, Highway 96. Fire hasn't really spread much on this flank at all in the past 36 hours, except here where it's doing a little chunking downhill. All right, I'm going to turn here and look at, we're looking north over 96 at the Beaver Fire from 2014. And fire has not spread much in there. There's a couple little fingers here outside of what was mapped 36 hours ago. This red is where the fire was making a run right before it got mapped the night before last, and it hasn't moved since then. Coming up over Quigley's Resort. Not a lot of spread here to report. I'm just going to spin us around and look out back kind of towards Wairika now. So now we're looking from the north onto the fire. And so this area here on the left hand of the screen, this is the eastern flank of the fire. This has been the highest priority. Looks on the ops maps like dozer line is complete around this end of the fire. There's also a dozer line that's been pushed around the town. That's still, at this point, it's kind of contingency in that the plan I heard yesterday, and if you aren't watching the Dennis Burns operational briefings on Facebook on Klamath National Forest, Dennis is really regarded as one of the best fire behavior analysts we got, and he's a great communicator. So check those out. Really good resource. He does a great job of explaining why and how and everything else. So here, Dennis said yesterday that they're looking at a direct attack here wherever possible. Obviously, that's tough on this really steep ground. But where they can, they are going direct. And we don't see a lot of spread here in the last 36 hours. some of this area where we see the fire not against the mapping, the last mapping, that was places where there were clouds obscuring the imagery when it got flown the night before last. So not a lot to report on that flank of the fire, except that a lot of work's been done with the dozers. And oftentimes what happens on this big kind of indirect dozer line strategy is that if we wait for the fire to jump the creek and get established in here and run up and hit our dozer line, it's likely the dozer line won't hold. And so oftentimes what happens when dozer line gets put in is that we end up waiting for good weather conditions and then firing that, or lighting, sending crews in and lighting off of this and letting the fire carry back in to the main fire. So depending on the topography and the resource values, is this grazing land, is this timberland, are there homes in there? Those are all considerations. We hear a lot of criticism of the big box firefighting, that the Forest Service just wants to back off to the ridge, that somehow big box firefighting is lazy, and that going direct is the way to go. This is a kind of massive cultural divide between CAL FIRE and the Forest Service. Going indirect is a lot of work, snagging all this dozer line, firing it, holding it, mopping it up. Both ways have, going direct is tough and often more dangerous and minimizes the size of the fire. Going indirect, you have more fire, but oftentimes it's safer for firefighters. What I will say is, in my experience on really large fires like this one, that oftentimes big indirect operations are the only way that we contain the fire. If we know that the fire is going to be at this ridge 4 days from now, it might take us 3 days to prepare this line. So if we spend those 3 days on an indirect attack in here that doesn't work out, then we don't have any time to really get this done. It's nice if you have enough resources to do both. Put in contingency line, prep, snag, and go direct. Oftentimes we don't have the luxury. So there's a lot of nuance to that argument. If the feds would only go direct, we'd keep these fires small so they wouldn't get large. Well, this fire's already large. And when you talk about 92 miles of perimeter and going direct, to put it out, we're lucky that we had all this rain. It's really bought the firefighters some good advantage in being able to go direct. Going direct's great when you can pull it off. But a lot of this big box firefighting is looking at maximizing the probability of success. Where can we put our energy and our resources to work in the place that they will buy us the most benefit? And from a resource standpoint, it may be that burning this out in a big backfire might not be the worst thing if it's a bunch of brush, if there's no homes in there. Oftentimes when we do burnouts, they're not under the conditions you would want. But other times on some of these big timber fires, the burnouts can be carried out more like a prescribed burn. So it's really complex. Large fire management, is as much an art as anything. Both CAL FIRE and Forest Service have their strengths and weaknesses, and just a lot that goes into when you start looking at, hey, how are we going to deal with 92 miles of open fire line? So that's the wrap up on McKinney. We're going to jump up here to this other fire, which I forget the name of, and it hasn't really moved much according to the infrared eye in the sky. A little more remote, but also it's up a little higher, 6,500 feet. So, cooler maybe. Might be helping them out. Sparse fuels, red fur. So not a lot to report there. We're going to fly now on our magic map. There's Red Butte out in the distance for you Siskiyou hikers. Let's go down to Syad. And while we're in transit, I got to switch a map here. So I'm just going to jump you over real quick to a little self-promotion. There we go. All right, we're going to figure out this live streaming. Maybe I need 3 monitors. Okay. This is a China fire. We're looking kind of... There's Syed, so we're looking kind of south. See that this fire is basically on this little peninsula that didn't get burned by the 2014 frying pan fire. You know, what we've seen a lot in this country is just that previous fires limit the size of the next generation of fires, like we're seeing on the Beaver Fire. Klamath's had a lot of fire. There's some patches out here that haven't burned for a long time. There's patches that have. So we can expect this fire likely isn't going to really burn 100,000 acres out to the east because it's going to hit the frying pan fire. When I get a second, I'll pull up some other recent fire history. But that's, you know, when we start looking at these big fires in the Klamath, what contains them, we start to see that the landscape becomes self-limiting in this kind of puzzle network of previous fires. So I'll pull that up in a minute. Anyway, China fire, these kind of squiggly pink lines are each time that virus has flown it. And so you can kind of see it has grown in spurts. It started here. I know it's not the easiest way to visualize. That's one of the things I'm struggling with virus is they just dump all their perimeters into a single file. And it's pretty hard for me to kind of take the latest one and parse it out. So still trying to figure that out. So it's down to the Klamath on the far side here, which was mapped today at about noon. These times are in Greenwich Mean Time. So the latest perimeter is noon, and you can see it's backing its way down. As we talked about, fire likes to move slower downhill. So all this backing here, this perimeter here, I think it's stacking them all up, so I can't really tell. Anyway, that's kind of where China fire's at. Looks like likely it's been kind of held on this road here. Oftentimes, if we get an opportunity at night or when the winds are in our favor, we can, put fire on the ground along a road system like this. And then it's just a matter more of holding the rollout or snags. Obviously, it's really helpful if we can get out here ahead of time and fall dead snags along the road than to do that once it's already on fire. Just another one of those things where you have to think about where the fire is going to be in a couple days. And if you have the resources, you have to be working where you're going to be able to do work that you can take advantage a couple days out. Another thing that's interesting to me here is just that, like, you see the edges of these previous fires. Oftentimes, those are strategic ridge lines or roads where a major firing operation or something else happened. So those end up being this kind of important place to do future work, right? If we know that we've had 5 fires in this landscape and we've held them every time along this road system or along this ridge line, then you can probably actually see this is probably a contingency line from 2014 where they put in a big dozer line in case they didn't hold the frying pan fire where they did. So we've done quite a bit of work over in the Klamath with the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, where we've mapped a lot of the historic dozer lines and then helped the locals to kind of pressure the Forest Service to put fuel breaks in places along existing infrastructure. If you have a limited amount of money to spend on fuels work, we need to be really strategic about where we spend that. So putting those projects in, if we come out here and we thin this ridge back and cut all the snags ahead of time, those are snags that aren't going to fall on someone's head when they drive in on a strike team from L.A., Angeles National Forest, in the middle of the night to fight a fire they haven't seen. So, a lot of times this big box that we talk about using to fight big fires, we're going to use that same big box on a future fire. So we might as well be doing work to prepare that and keep it maintained. When we talk about, strategic forest management and doing things that have a benefit for fires and fire control, that's one of the things we're talking about is, hey, let's not go and cut a bunch of brush up here and say that we did something. Let's look at cutting the brush around a town and on the ridge line where you're going to put a dozer line, etc. Okay, China fire. So that's little fuels management thrown in there for you. One thing I noticed today that I thought was interesting is that this fire here, the Kelsey, here's where it was 2 days ago, and here's where it is now. today. So this fire's grown a bit. It's hard to know what kind of it looks like there's some containment or some semblance of control along a road here, and it's out to this road. As we said the other day, there's really no such thing as a small timber fire mid-slope in the Klamath in August. So looks like we've had better air today. Hopefully, aircraft are helping them out on this particular fire. Once again, this fire is somewhat hemmed in by 8-year-old burn here, but as we're seeing on other fires, that isn't necessarily stopping fires, but it is helping us that they're moving a lot slower than it would if the area was unburned. Kelsey Fire. So that is off the Scott River Road. We're looking here over Fort Jones, so it's down the Scott River Road burning up a creek, which name I don't know. Cleghorn, no, Shackelford. Not showing a lot of growth on this one. Looks like that could be because I don't see it in my mapping, so I'm not sure if they flew it today, if they didn't fly it today because it's not going anywhere, but I can't tell you much about what's going on Shackelford. All right. That's your midday update. We'll keep our ear to the ground. Appreciate the support of everyone who's been donating. It is very helpful. Keep the lights on and give me time to focus on this work. If you're impacted by the fires, I hope you get to go home soon. Thanks, everyone.